I'm Tracy Sable. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, the Pope in Portugal. World Youth Day continues with a busy schedule for the Holy Father. We have a report from Lisbon. Court appearance. Former President Donald Trump travels to Washington, D.C. amid another indictment. Eye on Haiti. An update on the rising danger in the Caribbean nation. And award winners. U.S. bishops honor 3 women dedicated to the pro-life movement. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us on the Feast of St. Nicodemus. Our top story tonight, the Holy Father's first full day in Portugal was a busy one as he met with young people attending World Youth Day and listened to testimony from participants of different faith backgrounds. EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief Andreas Thonhauser has more.
Close to 500,000 young people have welcomed Pope Francis to the heart of Lisbon. Today was the first day of the Holy Father's apostolic trip that was fully dedicated to the youth. And in his official welcome address, he reminded the young people that they are all called by the Lord because they are all loved. Young pilgrims flocked to Lisbon from all over the world to answer this call.
I'm expecting to be renewed in my faith, have a new perspective, and really just come back better and stronger than I did before.
Growing stronger in one's faith and celebrating this faith with others from around the globe has been the main motivation for the pilgrims to come to Lisbon. But the encounter with the Holy Father is also an important factor.
The Pope is really important for me because it's a representation for my love for God in this earth, and I'm so excited to see him tomorrow.
The pilgrims will not only take part in big events, such as the Via Crucis on Friday, the Vigil on Saturday night, and the big final Mass on Sunday. They will also have time to meet with their bishops and other pilgrims from around the world in smaller events, such as catechetical sessions with their bishops called Rise Up, a vocational fair, and sports.
I just think that's like a sign of like how, even though we're all spread out, we're still one under the Pope, and that like we can still all be unified even if we're all different.
Encounter and sharing individual experiences of faith are a cornerstone of this gathering, especially in a time when many meetings have become limited to the digital space.
Kids today that have so many social connections but don't have real connections. This is something very tangible, like we're here all together, journeying together, pilgriming together. What a beautiful thing, what a beautiful support to these kids. They'll never forget it. It's life altering that they always know. The Catholic Church is there, it's for them, God is for them, we are all for them.
Over the weekend, the young pilgrims will convene at Parque Tejo, a large field at the outskirts of Lisbon, right along the Tagus River. There will also be many personal encounters between people from more than 200 nations. But as Pope Francis has often emphasized in the run-up to this World Youth Day, the most important encounter will not be the one between people, but the one with Jesus Christ. In Lisbon, Andreas Thonhauser, EWTN News Nightly.
And of the several 100,000 young people gathered in Portugal, many are from Latin America. We hear again from EWTN's Andreas Thonhauser, who caught up with a priest from Colombia to discuss the church in the region and the impact of having a pope from Argentina.
We're here next to the Parco Eduardo VII in the heart of Lisbon, where Pope Francis will be welcomed today by the pilgrims. In the background, they're already queuing up to enter the area. And with me is Father Jeronimo Espinosa from Colombia, who brought more than 100 young people from Latin America here to Lisbon. What was the experience so far, Father?
It's been a beautiful experience to bring. It's 120 kids from ages 18 to 35, and it's for a bunch of them, it's the first time having a lot of teens here gathering and Jesus Christ being the center of this gathering. So it's been a wonderful experience.
So you work in youth ministry. Why do young people still come to events like this? Why are they interested in the church?
Oh, they're interested because they desire to belong, and we belong to Jesus Christ. It's the right place to do it because we're not alone. We belong to the church, and this is the way to do it. And there's more and more people. We're not alone.
Father, Pope Francis is the first pope from Latin America. You're from Latin America. What was his impact on the church there, especially maybe in Colombia?
Well, first because he speaks Spanish, and 25 countries speak Spanish, so it's amazing to hear him in Spanish. But also the way he behaves, he acts, he's very Latino. So it's very welcoming for us, and we're 60% of Catholics in the world.
And can you maybe share one of the experiences that you had with the young people coming here to World Youth Day? What was that like?
Well, I remember like a couple of days ago, it was like, oh my gosh, this is the first time I haven't felt alone. People from all over the world, ages, sizes, colors, and we're all here because of Jesus Christ. This is changing my life. I'm going to say yes to the Lord. That was the answer of one of those kids.
What will the kids that you brought here, what will they be taking back from World Youth Day?
Oh, that they are called to evangelize people. We are here in this church to evangelize so everyone can meet Christ and to lead them closer to Christ. This is the calling of the church for every Christian, regardless of the age, regardless of where they live. It's to evangelize and encounter Christ.
And Father, this day and age where we have digital media, we can meet through our phones anywhere in the world. Is it still necessary to have such gatherings like this World Youth Day?
Oh yes, our relationship with Christ is personal. He became man. He incarnated himself so he can be close with us, and we need that as human beings. So it's important to be amongst people, and yes, we're all over, no more Zoom calls or COVID. We are called to be together as a church.
And are you excited today to encounter Pope Francis?
Oh yes, I am. It's always a beautiful experience to meet him again, to see him even though it's far away. It's the Vicar of Christ. He's the person of the Pope. He's the head of our church, and he is the unity of our church. So yes, it's very exciting.
Father Espinosa, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for being here in Lisbon.
No, thank you very much.
And in other news, back here in the U.S., church leaders in Virginia are praising new education guidelines from Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin. Both of the state's bishops say they welcome changes to the transgender and parents' rights school policies. It is now up to parents to decide if their child is permitted to indulge in a so-called transgender identity. Well, a historic day in the nation's capital, a special counsel bringing another round of 4 federal criminal charges against former President Donald Trump. The indictment involves his actions on January 6th. They allege that he knew he lost the election but was determined to stay in power. Capitol Hill correspondent Erik Rosales joins us now from the federal courthouse with the very latest. Erik.
Well, good evening, Tracy. You can actually see the barrier behind me, along with very much a heavy police presence out here in front of the federal courthouse. Protesters are being kept across the street, but I tell you what, we did capture former President Donald Trump's motorcade when it arrived. It arrived at around 3:15, well ahead of the 4 p.m. arraignment. The Secret Service used an underground entrance, which is in the back of the secure facility. He was booked and processed before he stood before the judge. We did learn that 3 Capitol police officers who were injured during the January 6th insurrection were actually in the courtroom when the former president pled not guilty. Protesters and demonstrators made their voices heard outside the federal courthouse. Inside the unprecedented arraignment of a former president of the United States, fingerprinted, booked, and facing new charges that he tried to keep control of the White House. An alleged criminal scheme that erupted on January 6th when rioters stormed the Capitol.
The attack on our nation's Capitol on January 6th, 2021 was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy. As described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies.
The indictment includes more than public statements, also his actions, including a pressure campaign targeting Republican officials and his own Vice President, Mike Pence. The indictment mentions Pence more than 100 times and states the former president told him, "You're too honest."
For my part, I want people to know that I had no right to overturn the election, and that what the president maintained that day, and frankly has said over and over again over the last 2.5 years, is completely false.
Trump's attorney is defending his actions.
Our defense is going to be focusing on the fact that what we have now is an administration that has criminalized the free speech and advocacy of a prior administration during the time that there is a political election going on. That's unprecedented.
The judge presiding over the case is Judge Tanya Chacon, an Obama appointee who has handed down from some very stiff sentences against January 6 defendants. She has also rejected Trump's efforts to block the January 6 committee from obtaining his presidential records, stating from the bench that presidents are not kings. It is starting to rain out here. Again, President Trump is still inside. He is actually, proceedings could last for about anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. But that's the very latest from outside the federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. This is Erik Rosales reporting for EWTN News Nightly.
Okay, thank you, Eric. As President Joe Biden continues his vacation, the White House is monitoring trouble overseas, including the war in Ukraine, where another church was attacked. President Biden also says Niger in Africa is facing a grave challenge to its democracy. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports.
Tracy, while President Joe Biden enjoys some time off in Delaware, the war in Ukraine continues with no break. Just last month, the Transfiguration Orthodox Cathedral in Ukraine was bombed in an attack, and now another church struck.
President Joe Biden riding his bike.
Mr. President, will you be following the arraignment today, sir? No.
Meanwhile, overseas, Russian shelling hits a landmark church in Ukraine, damaging St. Catherine's Cathedral, several wounded. And in Niger, in Africa, where military leaders have taken over, a rally in the capital in support of the coup. President Mohamed Bazoum recently toppled. Niger was seen as the West's last reliable partner in the region. President Biden releasing this statement on Niger's Independence Day, defending fundamental democratic values and standing up for constitutional order, justice, and the right of peaceful assembly are essential to the partnership between Niger and the United States. Adding, I call for President Bazoum and his family to be immediately released and for the preservation of Niger's hard-earned democracy. Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris in Wisconsin talking broadband infrastructure.
To connect every home to high-speed internet and to make sure that every person in America, no matter where they start, has access to opportunity and the tools that they need to thrive.
Also tonight, gas prices. Not long ago, the Biden administration was taking heat for high prices. Now, drivers are paying more again. The national average, $3.78 a gallon. That's about 25 cents more per gallon in just the last month. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
And we have a lot more still to come here on EWTN News Nightly, including border battle updates on the situation in New York City amid a surge of migrants and trouble in Haiti. The latest on a mother and daughter kidnapped while on mission. New York City has been dealing with a surge of migrants, and now the mayor says the city is out of room. Hundreds of migrants have been congregating outside of the Roosevelt Hotel, with many of them sleeping on the streets for days. But today, there are reports the area is now empty. Last month, Democrat Mayor Eric Adams sent representatives to the U.S. southern border to inform officials there the city has no more room. And now the city's deputy mayor for Health and Human Services wants the federal government to take charge. Joining us now is Rodney Scott, Distinguished Senior Fellow for Border Security and former Border Patrol Chief. Rodney, great to see you again. So what do you make of the situation in New York, and are you at all surprised by it?
No, I'm not surprised at all. Unfortunately, policy decisions have consequences. And the consequences of this administration literally walking away from border security and creating the chaos that we have on our southwest border, you're just seeing a very, very small snippet of that in New York, and they're freaking out over it. But these cities along the border in Texas, New Mexico, California, Arizona, they've been suffering for this since 2021, and no one's been paying attention. It doesn't surprise me that New York is, it actually does surprise me a little bit. They're freaking out this bad as a sanctuary city. But I think they're starting to see the consequences of their policy decisions and their rhetoric.
Yeah, and some critics are now alleging that city officials have been basically using these migrants in the long lines outside of the Roosevelt to put pressure on the state and federal officials to get more funding and also to discourage migrants from crossing the southern border. Rodney, your thoughts on that?
To discourage people from crossing the southwest border, there needs to be a consequence, not free handouts. Every administration prior to the Biden administration actually focused on border security and improving border security in some way. Obviously, the last administration did a ton, but this administration has completely walked away from it. And I hear New York now saying the same things as I hear about this administration saying, hey, just give us more money so that we can provide better care and feeding for these people that illegally entered our country. We need to go back to what really truly is the root cause, which is the invitation to come into our country. We need to lock down the border, secure the border, and start focusing on Americans first.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, and as we've talked about before, I mean, the border towns in Texas and other states really have been feeling the strain of accommodating this influx of migrants for a while now. But really, they really haven't got the attention like New York. That said, how do we balance the needs of the migrants with the resources of a community, which in many cases is very limited?
Yeah, correct. And in many cases, we use the term migrant, but let's be really realistic here. We're talking about illegal aliens that migrated to the United States purely for economic reasons. And if people will slow down and they'll actually look at the video, look at the photographs, many of these people are coming across the border with more cash in hand, well dressed with a lot of their personal belongings in a way that is not portrayed by mainstream media, if you will, or not highlighted. We cannot continue. It's just not. It's not a sustainable process to continue to give away the United States resources worldwide. We want to help people that really need help. That's why we have asylum laws. But this economic mass migration that's also being used by the cartel to cover up a lot of their illicit activities is causing significant damage not only to the United States, but to people that truly need asylum because they can't get to the front of that line because of all the fraud.
Yeah, and as we know,
we need to secure the border.
Yeah, and Rodney, as we know, it can be extremely dangerous, to make that trek across the southern border. In fact, just yesterday, 2 bodies were found in the Rio Grande near a floating barrier, which was installed by Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who is actually being sued now by the Justice Department because of those floating barriers. Rodney, what more do you know about the situation? And also, where is the line draw? When can states kind of protect their own borders? And when does the Fed get involved in that?
Yeah, those are some great questions. Fundamentally, securing the border and immigration law is a federal responsibility. Unfortunately, this administration walked away from it. So the questions you just asked are questions the states are asking constantly now internally. Where is that line? When is it an actual invasion when a governor can take action independent of the federal government? Back to those buoy barriers really quick. Any loss of life is horrendous, but under this administration's open border policies and the chaos that they've created, there have been thousands of deaths along the border and in that specific river. I actually, when I was chief, looked at those buoy barriers, we evaluated them, and we had decided to deploy them to deter illegal aliens from crossing that dangerous river. Those currents can be crazy. We don't have the authority to put it on the south side of the river, or we would do that to keep people out of the river completely. But the idea is to put that barrier up, create a deterrent, and save countless lives by the families that choose not to enter that water to begin with.
Rodney, we have a little less than a minute left, but I quickly want to talk about this. The Pentagon is set to pull troops from the southern border, which it deployed earlier this year for about 90 days, as you know, in order to help Border Patrol officials with the end of Title 42. What type of impact do you think that had, having the troops there, and what kind of impact do you think it will leave, their presence leaving? Will it leave a type of void?
So traditionally, having the military deployed to the border helps out tremendously by taking resources or taking jobs that Border Patrol, Border Patrol agents would normally do, and that allows the agents to go back out to the field. Unfortunately, though, in this administration, all that having the military did on the border was speed up the catch and release process. It actually sped up the flow of illegal aliens being released into the United States. So really, they're pulling off the border now isn't going to do anything for border security, negative or positive in any way. It could have made a big difference, but the way they were deployed and the way it was implemented this time, that didn't really make a difference.
Ronnie, thank you so much for coming on, for all your insights. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, a cry for help, a closer look at the rising crime wave in Haiti. Plus, U.S. bishops unveil the winners of an award for fighting for the unborn. Well, it has been 1 week since an American missionary and her daughter were kidnapped in Haiti by a criminal gang demanding a ransom. The New Hampshire native was providing health care in a clinic in the capital of Port-au-Prince when she was seized. Reports say they will not be a release until the group has received $1 million. Efforts are ongoing to free the mother and daughter. A new poll showing some disturbing trends in the United States regarding the attitude toward abortion. According to a new poll from the University of Chicago's Project on Security and Threats, 12% of Americans agree with the statement the use of force is justified to restore the federal right to abortion. That is an increase from 8% in January. The spike was most pronounced among self-described Democrats. Meantime, another poll says church attendance for Generation X has dropped. A survey of 2,000 adults found the percentage of people who attend worship services ages 39 to 57 has dropped to 28%. That is down from 41% in 2020. The percentage of Gen X that is going to church now matches that of millennials. Well, finally tonight, the U.S. Bishops Conference has selected the recipients of its annual Pro-Life Awards. The winners are Margaret Hartshorn, Aurora Tenergio, and the late Catherine Mosley, whose award was accepted by her husband. Their awards honor those who the bishop said have dedicated themselves to pro-life activities. And we thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.